Okay, good morning, integrated topic students. Ms. Codner here for May, yes, finally, the second, and for May, the third lesson. You're going to need paper, calculator, and take out your factoring packet, which will help you out with all the factorization. And also, I collected the homework assignment, which is 4 problems that I did for collection. So first off, I have a drill for you guys. We have a squared plus 12a plus 27. And they were doing this while I was collecting the homework assignments. First off, just to have a little refresher, we have a squared plus 12a plus 27. My greatest common factor is 1 because there's a 1 understood to be in front of the a squared. And my leading coefficient is that 1. So therefore, I'm putting my parentheses down and I'm splitting my a's. And then I'm looking at what 2 numbers multiplied together will give me my last term of 27 and add it together to give me my middle term of 12. So hopefully you said 9 and 3, and both of them are positive. So that's why my factors of that trinomial is a plus 9 times a plus 3. For number 2, we have an equation because right here we have an equal sign. So every time you have an equal sign, that means we're going to be doing some solving. And this equation has to be equal to 0. So first thing, I should be adding 33 to both sides. And once I do that, I will have x squared plus 14x plus 33 equals 0. Because none of those I can combine. So that 33 does not have an x, so that's why I'm not combining anything. So from here, I'm doing the factoring just like how I did for number 1. So my greatest common factor for this is 1. My leading coefficient is also 1. So that means I'm splitting up my variables, which is my x's. And I'm asking myself, what 2 numbers multiplied together will give me 33, and added together will give me 14. So hopefully you said plus 11 and plus 3, because 11 times 3 gives me 33, and 11 plus 3 gives me 14. So since we have them equal to 0, that means we got to do some solving. We have x plus 11, that's going to be equal to 0. And then we have x plus 3, that's going to be equal to 0. So right now, we're just going right into solving. So x equals negative 11, and x equals negative 3. So this means both negative 11 and negative 3, once I substitute it back into my trinomial, I should get an answer of 0. Okay, so that's just a little reminder of what we did last time. But for today's lesson, we're going into factoring trinomials when a does not equal 1. So that means when my leading coefficient is not 1. So in order for us to do this, it's almost like a partnership. Excuse me, microphone's acting kind of busy. Let's see, how'd that go? Okay. It's like a partnership between finding the product and the sum of numbers, like how we did for the previous lesson. And we're also going to pair it up, factoring by grouping. So this is a thought process that you should have. So it'll be best if you write these down. First off, you have the greatest common factor should be 1, and your leading coefficient is not 1. You're going to multiply the first and the last terms together. So far, step 2 and step 3 are going to sound familiar. Step 2, maybe not so much, but definitely step 3. So you're going to think what 2 numbers multiplied together is going to equal the middle term when you add them. And then the last step, we're going to make them into 4 terms, and we're going to solve by grouping. So example number 1, we have 4x squared minus x minus 5. So with this expression, our GCF is 1 because we got 4, we got 1, we got 5. The only number they have in common is 1. My leading coefficient in this case is going to be 4. The reason why that's my leading coefficient is because it has the highest exponent or the highest degree, which is a square. So that 4 is my leading coefficient. So that means I'm going to have to multiply this first term, which is my 4, with my last term, which is my negative 5. So I'm going to multiply those two numbers together to help me with the whole grouping process. So 4 times negative 5, that gives me a negative 20. And now I need to think what two numbers multiplied together will give me a negative 20 and add it together to give me this middle term, which is a negative 1. So hopefully you said, well, isn't it 4 and negative 5? Because that's correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a 4-term polynomial. So since we have 4x, okay, and that's positive, minus 5x, and this is coming from what two numbers multiplied together will give me that negative 20 and add it together to give me my middle term. So now in order to build that 4-term polynomial, I'm going to take our first term, which is that 4x squared, and I'm going to put it in front of our little expression here. Then I'm going to take my last term, which is that negative 5, and I'm going to put that with my expression. So now I have a 4-term polynomial. So we're going to solve this by what we've done before, which is called grouping. So we're going to group these two and group those two. So now, if you recall, when we did grouping, we need to find the GCF of each of the parentheses. So for this first parenthesis, my GCF is 4x. So that means I have to divide everything inside that parenthesis by my greatest common factor, which is 4x. So 4x squared divided by 4x is x, plus 4x divided by 4x is not x, it's actually 1. Because 4 divided by 4 is 1, x divided by x is 1. Okay? A number divided by itself is always 1. So then we have a minus sign. And the greatest common factor for this parenthesis is going to be 5. So here, we're going to divide everything by the negative 5. We could do what we did last time we did grouping. Because remember, once we do this, inside the parentheses have to be exactly the same. So we could have just said, okay, divide everything by 5 and then change the sign inside the parenthesis. Or you could just divide everything by the negative 5. So now we have a negative 5 divided by negative 5, which gives me x. A negative 5 divided by a negative 5, which gives me a plus 1. What do you notice? Inside the parentheses are exactly the same. So that means that is the greatest common factor for that whole expression. So we have that, and then in the other parenthesis, we're going to write down what's remaining, which is that 4x and the minus 5. This, ladies and gentlemen, is your factor of the trinomial whose leading coefficient was not originally 1. Okay? Yes, it seems like a lot of steps, but you also can do what's called guess and check. But I'm going to show you a couple more examples using this process before I get into the guessing and checking. So let's try example 2. We have 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. So my leading coefficient in this case is 2. So I should be multiplying my first term with my last term. So my first term is 2, my last term is 3, which will give me a total of 6. So now I have to think, what two numbers multiplied together would give me this 6 and add it together to give me that middle term of 7. So hopefully you said 6 and 1. And both of them are going to be positive. So it'll be a plus 6x and a plus 1x. So from here, I'm going to take my first term and bring it down so I can create my 4-term polynomial. And I'm bringing down my plus 3. So since I have my 4 terms, let's go right into grouping, meaning I need a greatest common factor for that first parenthesis, which is a 2x. So that means I'm dividing everything in here by 2x. Now I have x plus 3 that goes inside the parenthesis. Bring that plus sign down. Now what's my greatest common factor for 1x plus 3? 1 and 3, the only thing they have in common is 1. So therefore, inside this parenthesis, I should have 1x plus 3. Because if I did the division of 1, anything divided by 1 is itself. Hopefully you notice that inside the parentheses are exactly the same. So remember, when you're doing grouping and you know you did it right, inside your parentheses will always be the same. I know that this one says just x and this one says 1x. Remember, 1x and x means exactly the same thing. What's left over is 2x plus 1, and this, or these, are the factors of our original trinomial. Okay? So we're combining two ways that we've touched on in class with factoring. We're combining finding the numbers for the trinomials to help with that middle term, which we did last class. And you're also doing grouping, which we did about, I want to say, like 4 or 5 classes ago. Okay? So as you notice, we keep spiraling this information in. So example 3, we have 9x squared minus 47x plus 10 equals 0. So compared to the first two examples, what's different? This one has an equal sign, so that means we're solving, just like how we did for that one problem in the drill. So before we get into solving, we got to look at it. What's my greatest common factor? It's 1. What's my leading coefficient? It's 9. My leading coefficient is 9 because I have the high degree of 2. So right away, I'm going right into it. I'm multiplying my first term with my last term. Okay? We're not dealing with the equal 0 until after we finish factoring. So now, 9 times 10, last time I checked, that's 90. So what two numbers multiplied together will give me 90 and added together will give me a negative 47? So most of the time with the factoring, it's just trying to find those right combinations. There's going to be a chance, I think, that you're going to be using negative numbers here. But you need numbers that's going to multiply together to give you 90 and add it together to give you a negative 47. So hopefully you thought of negative 45x minus 2x, because negative 45 times a negative 2 gives you a positive 90. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. So if I add them, a negative 45 plus a negative 2, that will give me negative 47. So from here, I'm going to take and bring down my first term, which is 9x squared, and I'm going to bring down my last term, which is the plus 10, and just like everything in the original, I'm just going to bring down that equals 0. So again, I got 4 terms. So I'm going right into grouping. Greatest common factor for the first parenthesis is 9x. So that means I'm dividing everything inside here by the 9x. So that gives me x minus 5 inside this first parenthesis. We'll bring down the minus sign. Greatest common factor for the second parenthesis is 2. So now I have a negative 2 that I can go ahead and divide. And here I'll have x minus 5. And bring down your equals 0. What do you notice? Inside the parentheses are exactly the same. So that means that's my greatest common factor for this equation. And then what's left over is going in its own parenthesis. And I'm bringing down my equals 0. So now we have our factors. Now we have to solve. So let's go ahead and solve. We have x minus 5 equals 0. So we're setting these both factors to equal 0. And then we have 9x minus 2 equals 0. So in this case, x equals 5 because I had to add 5 on both sides. But for the other one, we got to do a little bit more. So I have to add 2 to both sides. So I have 9x equals 2. Divide by 9. That means x equals 2/9. Or you can say x equals 0.2 repeatedly. Okay, so you can either have it as the fraction form or you can have it as the decimal form. So this is telling me if I plugged in 5 or if I plugged in 2/9, I will get an answer of 0 each and every time for my original, which is all the way up here, my original trinomial. I know you're looking at this like, oh my God, this is so much work. All I'm doing is putting 2 steps together. Okay, so now, example number 4. We got negative 4x squared plus 17x plus 15. So let's take a look. What's different? This time, my leading coefficient is a negative number. And you're probably thinking, oh God, what do we have to do? You're still doing the same exact thing. I'm still going to multiply my first and my last term. So I have a negative 4 times 15, which will give me a negative 60. Okay? So now I need to think, what 2 numbers multiplied together will give me a negative 60 and added together to give me 17? So you really have to think about your multiplication. Okay? Sometimes it may take longer, sometimes it may not take as long. So hopefully we have 20x, and it's positive, minus 3x. Because 20 times a negative 3 gives me negative 60. And 20 minus 3, or 20 plus a negative 3, will give me a positive 17. So just like how we did before, we're bringing our first term down, which is negative 4x squared. We're bringing our last term down, which is plus 15. Now, if the original expression does not have an equals 0, do not put the equals 0. You guys are giving yourselves more work than you have to. You can knock yourselves and find out what the zeros are, but if the original problem does not state an equal sign, don't put it there. Okay? So now, going into solving, we got 4 terms. Let's go right into that grouping. So here, group the first term, group the second term. Greatest common factor for the first parenthesis. I know you're going to want to say 4x, but since we have that minus sign or that negative sign in there, let's pull that negative out. So it's actually, as your GCF, it's actually going to be a negative 4x, because then in here, you'll be able to get your x minus 5. Okay? You pull that negative out, and trust me, it's going to make sense. Other side, we have a minus, so we're bringing that down. Greatest common factor for that is 3. So then you have your x minus 5. If I did not pull that negative out, let's just say I didn't pull this negative out. I'm also getting rid of the 4. That means I would have to have a negative x here, and then I would have to have a positive 5 there. Look at the parentheses. As we always said, when you're doing grouping, that means those parentheses have to be exactly the same. In this case, are my parentheses exactly the same? It isn't. So that's one of the reasons why I suggest that you pull out your negative, because when it comes down to the other parenthesis, you're actually going to have the same information in each of the parentheses. So you have the matching. So you don't have to do something extra or add another line. Okay? So when you have a leading coefficient that's negative, pull that negative symbol out once you do your grouping. Okay? So now let's put it all together. We have x minus 5, that's my greatest common factor. What's left over is a negative 4x minus 3, and those are my factors for my original trinomial. Okay? Okay, example number 5. I think this is the last one that I had. So for example number 5, we have negative 5x squared plus 7x plus 6. So my leading coefficient is a negative number. Still starting out as the same. So we have a negative 5 times 6, which gives me a negative 30. So what two numbers multiplied together will give me a negative 30 and added together to give me this middle term of 7? So obviously 5 and 6 is not going to work. What else can give me 30? I know a couple people said 15 and 2, but add together, that's not going to give me 30. What else do we have? What else can give me 30? 3 and 10. One of them has to be negative. Which one? So since we're going with a positive 7, that means my highest number has to be positive. So therefore we have a negative 3x and a plus 10x. So from here, we're bringing down the negative 5x squared, bringing down the plus 6, and we're going right into grouping. So first parenthesis, what is my greatest common factor? It should be x, but could we say negative x? Remember, my leading coding right now is a negative. So we'll pull that negative x out. Then we have what? Okay, so then you have your 5x and plus 3. We have a plus sign, so we're going to bring that down. Greatest common factor with this would be 2. So that means I'm dividing everything up here by 2. So that means I have 5x plus 3. Do I have the same parentheses? Yes, I do. So that means I have 5x plus 3. And then what's left over in here is negative x plus 2. So as you can see right here, those are your two factors for our original trinomial. Okay, so hopefully you're kind of getting this. You're still thinking of you're multiplying the first and the last term. After you do that, you're talking to yourself and figuring out what two numbers multiplied together will give me that answer that I received when I multiplied the first and last term. And added together will give me my middle term. Once you figure out what those two numbers are, they're going right smack in the middle. Then you're bringing your first term down, then you bring your last term down. Once you do that, you're going to go right into grouping. So that means you're finding the GCF for each of the parentheses. Then you look to see that your parentheses are exactly the same. You're writing that down because that's going to be the GCF for the whole entire expression or equation. And then you write the remainder information down. Okay? So would it be wrong if you have these as your examples? So I gave the class these 3 problems to do. And I suggest for you, as for extra practice, to do these 3 problems. And what's written in red is the solutions to those 3 problems. So your solution should kind of compare to mine. Let's say for number 1, you wrote x minus 7 in parentheses 3x plus 1. That's fine. Because remember, when you're dealing with multiplication, it's interchangeable. Okay? So give these a try. See if you get the same answers as I do. And if you don't and you're still kind of lost and confused, please don't hesitate to see me during Wildcat Hour or ask questions during class. Because I think with this whole process, we're going to plan on doing it for a couple of days. So we're going to have some more examples for the May 4th and May 5th lesson. And we're also going to do some classwork activities just to really just hit hard on these before we have any kind of quizzes or assessments. Okay? So those were practice problems or guided problems for the students to do. But the homework for this evening are these 4 problems here. 2y squared plus y minus 1, 9p squared plus 6p minus 8, negative 6k squared plus 7k plus 10, and 10b squared minus 15b equals 8b minus 1. So a lot of similarities, especially with number 4, a lot of similarities to what number 3 was going on, but it did refer to make sure that your equations are equal to 0. So that will be your helpful little hint, okay? So that was basically what we did in class for May 2nd and what we're going to do in class on May 3rd. As I said before, we're going to continue working on factoring trinomials when our leading coefficient is not 1. We're going to do that for the 4th and for the 5th. Probably going to have like a mini quiz for the 6th and for the 9th. And we're going to have our last assessment on the week of the 9th. Because we're going to have students that are taking AP testing, and the following week is going to be HSA testing. So that week I'm only going to see students either once or twice, depending what class period you have with me for that entire week. So we're really going to be working hard. Seniors are going to get pulled out to finish working on their final projects. So we're going to have them get themselves started the following week and just work on it that week, the following week, and get ready to present on the 24th to me. All right? So any questions, any concerns, please don't hesitate to either email, comment, or come see me during Wildcat Hour first lunch all this week.